The signal came without warning, a whisper in the static of deep space that turned into a desperate cry. It came from the farthest edge of known space, a region known only as the Orion Fringe, where no living thing had been heard from in decades. At first, the transmission was just noise, a faint pulse of energy too weak to matter. Then the computers cleaned it up and the message took shape. A voice not human filled the speakers, trembling, broken, full of fear. "Help us. Coordinates attached. They're coming." Across the SolNet communication web, every listening post and research satellite caught the signal. Within minutes, Earth's Unified War Command had it in their hands. The message was old, warped by distance and time, but the urgency in that voice was timeless. Somewhere out there, someone, or something, was dying. Admiral Helena Voss, commander of Earth's war fleets, listened to the decoded audio in silence. She had fought wars across half the stars and seen empires burn, but there was something different in this message. It wasn't a call for alliance or power. It was a simple, helpless cry. Her officers debated the risk. It could be a trap, a lure set by hostile forces. The Orion Fringe was a dead zone for a reason. Ships went there and never returned. Yet when Voss looked out at the holomap of that empty region, she didn't see danger. She saw duty. Tag it. Authenticate it. Then send the Armada, she said calmly. And with those words, she set history in motion. Within 48 hours, the great war docks of Mars and the orbital rings of Luna came alive. Engines thundered. Crews ran through corridors of steel, loading supplies and weapons. Thousands of men and women said goodbye to their families under the light of a rising Earth, knowing they might not return. 12 colossal battleships formed the heart of the fleet, surrounded by carriers, destroyers, and escort frigates, the full power of humanity's defense. For centuries, humans had grown from a fractured species barely able to reach the moon into a civilization that spanned hundreds of worlds. They had fought wars against nature, against themselves, and against alien threats that saw them as nothing more than upstarts. Yet every time, humanity had endured. They had become the guardians of the frontier, not because they were the oldest race or the wisest, but because they were the most unwilling to surrender. When the engines of the warfleet lit the sky above Mars, the reflection could be seen from the surface, a trail of light stretching toward the stars. Reporters called it the March of Earth. In homes and colonies across the solar system, people watched in silence, united by pride and fear. The ships' names became prayers whispered into the night. Dauntless, Vigilant, Hammerfall, Lionheart. These were more than metal vessels. They were symbols of the human spirit, forged from the belief that no cry for help should go unanswered. As the fleet prepared to jump into FTL, Captain Elias Trent of the Dauntless stood at his command deck, gazing at the swirling tunnel of hyperspace ahead. He had served long enough to know what awaited beyond the unknown. Darkness, silence, and things that did not care about mercy. But his hands were steady. Around him, his crew worked without complaint. They knew the risks, yet none hesitated. Somewhere, far away, someone had called for help. That was all they needed to know. Humanity did not turn away from the cries of others, not anymore. The countdown began. Engines flared. Across the fleet, captains called out final checks. In the void above Neptune, the ships aligned like a constellation of war, each one glowing with defiant purpose. Voss's voice echoed through every channel, strong and calm. "This is the Unified War Command. Destination, Orion Fringe. Mission, rescue. No one gets left behind." And then, as one, the fleet vanished into the stars, a spear of light racing into the dark, ready to face whatever waited beyond. Somewhere out there, in the endless cold, a stranger's plea still echoed. And humanity, as it always had, was on its way to answer. The fleet broke out of hyperspace in a sudden flash of blue light, and the stars snapped back into view like cold eyes staring through the dark. At once, the silence of deep space filled the command decks, that heavy, endless quiet that always followed the jump. Captain Elias Trent of the Dauntless stood on the bridge, gripping the railing as the holographic display came alive around him. The readings made his gut tighten. They had arrived at the coordinates from the distress call, but what he saw was not a living system. It was a graveyard. All around them drifted the broken bodies of ships, enormous vessels, alien in design, their hulls scorched and split open as if something had torn them apart from the inside. Pieces of metal the size of mountains turned slowly in the light of a dying red star. Some still carried faint power signatures, flickering like the last heartbeat of a dying creature. "God," someone whispered. Trent said nothing. The void didn't need commentary. It only demanded respect. Admiral Voss's voice came through the command link, calm but heavy. Form defensive perimeter. Deploy reconnaissance drones. Keep your guns hot. Around the Dauntless, the rest of the fleet moved into formation with practiced precision. Battleships took point, carriers drifted behind, and swarms of small interceptors spread out like sparks in the dark. The first drone feeds appeared on Trent's display, showing the wreckage in clearer detail. The symbols on the shattered hulls matched Saurian markings, a reptilian species humanity had met a decade ago. The Saurians were explorers, scientists, not soldiers. They had traded with human colonies, shared technology, even attended Earth's diplomatic summits. They were peaceful and curious, always eager to learn. To see their ships like this, torn, burned, and drifting, made something cold settle in Trent's stomach. He switched to the Admiral's channel. Looks like the Saurians didn't send that distress call for nothing. Voss's reply was quiet but firm. Open hails. Let's find out who's still breathing. The communications officers tried every frequency. For long minutes there was only static. Then, through the static, a voice broke through. Weak, broken, trembling with exhaustion. "This is Saurian Outpost Arca 9, please." "They're still here," Trent leaned forward. "Who's still there?" "We're here to help. Identify the threat." But before the voice could answer, every alarm on the ship screamed to life. Red warning symbols exploded across the display. Hundreds of new energy signatures had just appeared on sensors, sliding out from behind the shadow of a dead moon that hung over the system like a watchful corpse. Trent froze, watching as the swarm of signals grew larger by the second. They were ships, but nothing like any design he had ever seen. Black and sharp, moving in perfect silence, without heat trails or radio chatter. They didn't broadcast signals or names. They simply moved together, a wall of darkness gliding toward the fleet. Voss's voice was sharp now. "All units, hold position. Identify targets." The nearest alien ship drifted close enough for the scanners to paint its image. It looked alive. Its surface pulsed like muscle under translucent armor, veins of blue light running along its hull. Then, without warning, it opened fire. A single beam of white-blue energy sliced through the void and struck the crippled Saurian station at the center of the wreck field. In an instant, the station exploded into a cloud of debris and flame. The voice that had been calling for help vanished mid-scream. On the Dauntless, the bridge fell silent for half a heartbeat, everyone staring at the expanding fireball. Trent clenched his jaw. "So that's our answer." Voss didn't hesitate. Her words carried the weight of command and fury. "All ships, weapons free." The order flashed across every console in the fleet. Gun ports opened, missile bays came alive, and shields flared to full power. In seconds, the calm of space was replaced by chaos. Beams of light crossed the dark as the first volleys were exchanged. The Dauntless shook as its main cannons fired, sending streaks of plasma toward the advancing swarm. Around them, the void erupted into a storm of fire and death. The human fleet had come to rescue, but the galaxy had other plans. The unknown enemy had arrived, and humanity was about to find out what they really were. The battle began without mercy. Space, usually silent and empty, became a storm of fire and light. The Virek ships moved like shadows, black and angular, cutting through the void with terrifying precision. Their energy weapons glowed a harsh blue-white as they struck the human ships, slicing through shields and hulls with brutal efficiency. Captain Elias Trent barked orders over the comms, his voice steady but urgent. "Delta Wing, intercept those vectors. Focus fire on the center mass. Don't worry about the drones." Around him, human gunners worked like machines, unleashing volleys of plasma and railgun slugs at near-light speeds. The Dauntless hull vibrated with every impact, sparks flying along the corridors, but the crew held fast. Every strike, every maneuver was measured. Humanity didn't panic. They adapted. That was what made them dangerous. The Virak were relentless, but humans were clever, willing to risk everything to hold the line. Explosions erupted across the field as human ships found their marks. One of the Virak cruisers collided with a destroyer, tearing both apart in a spectacular burst of fire and debris. Still, the human fleet pressed forward, forming tight phalanxes to protect the more vulnerable carriers. Plasma beams crisscrossed the darkness like lightning bolts, igniting clouds of drifting wreckage and illuminating the skeletal remains of alien ships. The carriers released swarms of fighter craft, sleek and deadly, darting through the chaos to strike the enemy from unexpected angles. Pilots shouted through comms, adrenaline mixing with fear, but each movement was precise. They had trained for this, for the unknown, for the impossible, and now all that practice counted for everything. The Virak didn't retreat. They didn't hesitate. They came forward like predators, striking at the humans with a terrifying coordination. But humans fought back with something the Virak did not expect: ingenuity. Captain Trent watched as one of the dauntless torpedo volleys found its target, tearing through two of the alien ships and sending them spinning into the debris field. Around him, the bridge crew adjusted tactics on the fly, redirecting shields, redistributing power to weapons and engines. Every second counted. Outside, fighters weaved between wreckage, dodging pulses of energy that could tear their ships apart in an instant. On the human side, losses began to mount. Alarms screamed as ships were struck, hulls breached, and lives were lost in the blink of an eye. But even as bodies fell, humanity did not falter. Each destroyed ship, each fallen comrade strengthened their resolve. The human fleet fought with the determination of those who had everything to protect: their homes, their families, their very way of life. Fear was present, yes, but it never dominated. It was a tool, sharpened into focus, and it made them lethal. Hours passed, though time felt like minutes in the intensity of battle. The Virak were powerful, more so than anyone had imagined, but they were not perfect. The humans noticed patterns, weak points in their swarm formations, vulnerabilities in the hive-like coordination of their attacks. Trent exploited these gaps, directing missile volleys and plasma strikes to disrupt the enemy's lines. One by one, Virak ships fell, exploding in brilliant flashes that lit the graveyard of space like fireworks. Yet the cost was high. 6 human ships were lost in the engagement, tearing the hearts from crews who had trained together for years. Captain Trent's voice carried across the bridge, tight with anger and sorrow, yet unwavering. "Hold the line! They'll come back, they always do." Admiral Voss's calm voice cut through the chaos, carrying both reassurance and grim determination. "Prepare for the second wave. They will return in greater numbers. Be ready." The human fleet, though battered, had proven something essential. Even against an overwhelmingly powerful enemy, they could endure, adapt, and survive. In the void of the Orion Fringe, amidst the ruined remnants of alien and Saurian ships alike, humans had shown the first spark of their true strength. They were not the strongest, but they were stubborn, clever, and relentless. They fought not for conquest, but for survival, for duty, and for those who could not fight themselves. The first battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And somewhere, deep in the darkness, the Virak regrouped, unaware that their relentless assault had awakened a force in humanity that would not rest until justice, or vengeance, was done. After the first wave of attacks, the human fleet regrouped in the shadow of a shattered moon. The wreckage of the Saurian station and the destroyed Virak ships floated like tombstones in the void, a silent reminder of the cost of survival. Captain Elias Trent and Admiral Voss knew the enemy would return stronger, smarter, and more numerous. On board the Dauntless, Chief Tech Officer Mira Solis pored over sensor data from the remains of the Virak ships they had captured. She had spent years studying alien technology, but nothing had prepared her for what she saw. The ships were not piloted in any way humans could recognize. There were no crews, no command bridges, no signs of life. Instead, the machines were alive in a different sense. They were grown, a blend of metal and bioorganic tissue, and all were connected through a central signal, a hive mind that controlled every movement with perfect coordination. Mira felt a shiver run down her spine. The Virak weren't just an army. They were a single living intelligence spread across hundreds of ships. Destroying 1 or 10 wouldn't matter. They would reorganize and continue the attack. The challenge was not just to fight them. It was to break their connection. Mira called Admiral Voss to the lab on the Dauntless. She explained what she had found and her plan. "We can't just shoot them. It won't stop them. But if we can reach their hive core and disrupt the signal, we can cripple their coordination," she said. Voss listened carefully, her face set in calm determination. "How do you propose we do it?" she asked. Mira's eyes gleamed with a mixture of fear and excitement. "We can send a virus, not just a computer virus, something that can integrate with their biostructure and scramble the hive network. But it has to be uploaded directly at the source. There's no other way," Voss nodded. "Then we'll need someone to deliver it. The risks are extreme." Mira hesitated only for a moment before looking at Captain Trent. "You'll have to go in," she said quietly. Trent's jaw tightened. He had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. There was no way back. "I know," he said. "Someone has to knock on the devil's door." The plan took shape quickly. The fleet would hold the line, drawing the Virak swarm away from the central hive vessel, while the Dauntless slipped through the chaos. Fighter squadrons would escort them, intercepting any attack ships that got too close. The virus had been crafted and loaded into the Dauntless systems, ready to be injected into the alien nerve core. Trent studied the map of the enemy formation, memorizing the route, calculating shields, weapons arcs, and the swarm's likely behavior. Every decision mattered, because one mistake would mean instant death, not just for him, but for the crew who had volunteered to go with him. Still, the resolve in the room was unwavering. Humans had faced impossible odds before, and each time they had adapted, survived, and overcome. This was no different. It was a test of courage, ingenuity, and willpower. As the fleet prepared to move, the atmosphere on board the Dauntless was tense but focused. Engineers ran final checks on the virus deployment system, weapon crews recalibrated, and navigators confirmed the course through the debris-strewn battlefield. The men and women aboard the ship were aware of the danger, yet none wavered. They had trained for scenarios like this, and now it was their moment. Trent walked the corridors one last time, speaking quietly to his crew. "We go in, we do our duty, and we give the galaxy a fighting chance. No matter what happens, we act as one. That's all any of us can do." They nodded, some with grim smiles, others with silent tears. The weight of the mission pressed down on everyone, but it also sharpened their focus. Outside, the void awaited, dark and empty. But it would not be empty for long. Humanity was about to make its move, not just with weapons, but with brains, courage, and a willingness to face death for the chance to save countless lives. And in the cold black of the Orion fringe, that determination would shine brighter than any star. The Dauntless plunged into the storm of battle, the black void around it alive with flashes of energy and the trails of missiles weaving like deadly threads. Captain Elias Trent gripped the railing on the bridge, eyes fixed on the approaching Viric command ship. It was enormous, a living fortress of dark metal and pulsing blue veins, a hive in itself, controlling every other ship in the swarm. Fighters swarmed around them, darting through the chaos, intercepting enemy strikes and clearing paths for the frigate to reach its target. Trent's heart pounded, not from fear but from the weight of responsibility. Every second counted, and one mistake could end the mission, and all of them. The engines of the Dauntless roared as the ship cut through the debris-strewn battlefield, weaving between explosions and drifting wrecks. Every hit from the enemy scraped along the hull, shaking the ship violently, but the crew kept steady. They moved with precision, as if the chaos were a dance they had practiced their entire lives. Outside, the Virac swarm advanced relentlessly, black shapes merging and splitting, striking at any opening they could find. As the Dauntless approached the command vessel, Trent coordinated with the fighter squadrons. "Gamma Wing, left flank intercept. Beta, cover our aft. Shields to full!" His voice was steady, giving orders as calmly as if they were navigating a routine patrol. The Virac command ship loomed closer, its surface rippling as if alive, reacting to every movement of the human frigate. Trent could see the main neural core through the hull, a glowing lattice of biometal that pulsed like a heartbeat. This was the brain of the hive, the key to controlling the entire swarm. The virus Mirasolus had prepared was loaded and ready to upload, but reaching the core would require precision, courage, and sheer luck. There was no alternative. Every human ship in the fleet depended on their success. Every Saurian life depended on it too. Trent's crew moved into position, ready to breach the alien hull through a carefully calculated entry point. And as the Dauntless rammed through the outer plating, the ship shuddered under the impact, sparks flying, alarms screaming. Hull breaches were sealed instantly, and Trent's hands moved instinctively over the controls, guiding the ship through the twisting corridors of the alien vessel. Inside the command ship, energy arcs flared as the hive reacted violently to the intrusion. The alien systems shrieked, defensive measures activating in unpredictable bursts of light and force. Trent and his crew fought to maintain control, dodging surges of bioelectricity and stabilizing the vessel as they approached the neural core. "Upload program ready," Mira's voice crackled through the comm system. Trent nodded, his fingers poised over the console. The virus, designed to scramble the hive mind, would travel through the biometal network, turning the Virac's own connection against them. But the core fought back, sending waves of psychic energy that rattled the ship and shook the minds of the crew. Sparks flew, consoles exploded, and the corridors shook as if the vessel itself were alive and enraged. Trent gritted his teeth, feeling the physical and mental strain pressing down on him, but he didn't hesitate. With a firm motion, he initiated the upload. "Virus away," Mira's voice said, almost like a prayer. Trent exhaled, relief and tension mixing in a single heartbeat. He knew the hive would collapse now, but the ship around them was dying. The Dauntless began to break apart from the strain of the battle and the alien vessel's defenses. Trent realized there was no escape. With a grim smile, he gave the final command, self-destruct. All hands, brace for impact. Execute final countdown. The crew followed the procedure flawlessly, knowing their sacrifice would be meaningful. Outside, the explosion blossomed like a miniature sun, tearing the Virak command ship apart and sending shockwaves through the remaining swarm. Energy pulses ricocheted across the debris field, knocking out ships still engaged in the battle. The hive was shattered, the swarm leaderless, and for the first time the Virak were vulnerable. As the light of the explosion faded, the surviving human ships pressed the advantage, striking the disorganized enemy with relentless precision. Captain Trent's last act had turned the tide. Through courage, ingenuity, and selfless determination, humanity had delivered a devastating blow to a seemingly unstoppable foe. The void, once filled with relentless predators, now held only the scattered remnants of the Virak, and humanity had proven that even in the darkest reaches of space, their will to protect life and fight for justice could not be broken. The battlefield was quiet now, but the silence was heavy with the remnants of fire and destruction. The Virak swarm, once an overwhelming tide of black ships, drifted in chaos, leaderless and broken. Energy arcs flickered across the wreckage, and scattered hulls floated like tombstones in the dark void. Captain Elias Trent's sacrifice had done its job. The virus he had delivered had shattered the hive mind, leaving the enemy disorganized and vulnerable. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, advanced cautiously, clearing the remaining Virak ships with precision strikes. Carriers launched final waves of fighters to ensure no ship could regroup. Each explosion of an enemy vessel was both relief and sorrow, relief that the threat was ending, sorrow for the comrades lost in the battle. Admiral Helena Voss directed the fleet with a steady hand, her voice calm yet filled with the weight of the victories and losses. Every ship and crew that had survived the relentless engagement now became a part of the cleanup and rescue operation, combing through the debris to locate any survivors among the Saurians. Their sensors picked up a few faint life signatures among the wreckage, fragile but alive, and crews scrambled to save them before it was too late. Humanity had come to answer a distress call, and they had not left anyone behind if it could be helped. The surviving Saurians were weak, frightened, and traumatized, but they were alive. Human medical teams worked tirelessly to stabilize them, providing oxygen, nutrients, and comfort. Mira Solis watched the teams at work, feeling the weight of what had been accomplished and the cost of their victory. Captain Trent had given everything, and the crew of the Dauntless had followed him into the heart of danger. Their courage had turned the tide, proving that humanity could stand against forces far greater and more terrifying than themselves. Voss visited the recovered survivors, speaking gently to them, offering reassurance in words they could understand. The Saurians, though shaken, recognized the bravery and determination of the humans who had come for them. A bond of trust, forged in the crucible of fire and loss, began to form between the two species. Humanity had answered the call not for glory, not for conquest, but because they believed that life, any life, was worth protecting. Across the fleet, the human crews repaired damage, recharged shields, and tended to the wounded. The loss of 6 ships and hundreds of lives weighed heavily on every officer and sailor, but there was also a sense of triumph. They had faced a foe that seemed unstoppable and had found a way to prevail through courage, intelligence, and cooperation. Captain Trent's decision to sacrifice the Dauntless was a reminder of the human capacity for selflessness, the willingness to risk everything for the greater good. His name and the names of his crew would be remembered in the halls of Earth's war academies and in stories told across human colonies. They had become legends not because they sought fame, but because their actions embodied the very best of humanity: courage, ingenuity, and relentless determination. As the fleet regrouped, Admiral Voss addressed the commanders through the main channel. Her voice was calm, resonant, and filled with pride. Humanity answers distress calls. We fight not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. Let this victory be a reminder. Wherever the void cries for help, we will answer. Outside the ship windows, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting the resilience of the human spirit. Somewhere in the blackness, faint signals pulsed from the remaining Saurian ships, weak but persistent, a quiet testament to survival and hope. Mira Solis stood at a viewport, staring into the endless darkness, realizing that the galaxy was dangerous. But humans were more dangerous still when driven by purpose and compassion. They had faced death, chaos and an enemy unlike any other. Yet they had emerged victorious. Humanity had left its mark on the Orion Fringe, not through conquest, but through courage and sacrifice. And in that silence, heavy with both loss and triumph, a new light of hope flickered, a reminder that even in the darkest reaches of space, humanity's will to protect life, to fight for justice, and to answer the call would never fade.